Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about Stephen King's Misery. We had a request for this one on our YouTube channel. I don't have time to read.
Makes sense.
Yeah, right. That's a classic. But who really does have time to read? So that's why we're here to dive into this chilling tale.
And chilling it is. It really gets under your skin, gets you thinking.
Definitely. Okay, so to set the stage, we have Paul Sheldon. He's this famous author, right? Known for his historical romance series.
Featuring Misery Chastain, of course.
Misery Chastain, his beloved character. Anyway, Paul's just finished his latest manuscript. He's driving through a blizzard.
Talk about setting the mood, right?
No, yeah, King's a master at that. And bam, suddenly car accident.
Not just any accident either.
Right, it's bad. We're talking shattered legs, serious injuries.
This is where King's genius for suspense really shines through, the accident. It's almost like foreshadowing.
How so?
Well, Paul loses control completely. He's vulnerable, at the mercy of the elements.
Kind of like how he'll be later with Annie.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it's there. And then into this scene comes Annie Wilkes, our knight in shining armor, so to speak.
Yeah, except not really, right?
Not quite. But at first, she seems like a godsend. She's a former nurse, lives alone on this remote farm, and she just happens to be Paul's #1 fan.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time, I guess.
Or the wrong place, depending on how you look at it. She rescues Paul, brings him back to her home.
And tends to his injuries, right? With what seems like genuine care at first.
Oh, absolutely. She even has a copy of his latest Misery novel ready to go. Like the perfect fan, right?
If only it were that simple. Anyone who's read King knows things are never quite what they seem. And Annie, well, her true colors come out pretty quickly.
They do. She's got this volatile personality swinging from doting caregiver to, well, something much darker.
Yeah, it's like the switch flips in her.
Yeah.
And that whole obsession with Misery Chastain. The fictional character, I mean.
Sure.
Not exactly a sign of a healthy mind.
Yeah,
Right?
not at all. It's like she can't separate fiction from reality. And that's where things start to get really unsettling. Remember, Paul just finished a new manuscript. But it's not a Misery book. Annie finds it and, well, let's just say she's not pleased.
Understatement of the century.
Right. She makes Paul burn it, claims it's for his own good. You can already see this power dynamic emerging.
Oh, absolutely. Annie's in control now.
Yeah.
His pain medication, his contact with the outside world, and now even his creative output. Talk about a nightmare for a writer.
It is. King's really using this situation to explore, I think, the idea of a creator being totally subservient to their audience. Paul, the author who usually holds all the power. Now he's a puppet.
And Annie's pulling the strings.
Exactly. It's a fascinating and terrifying look at what fandom can become when it goes too far, and it gets even more twisted when we learn about Annie's care.
You're talking about the whole pain medication thing.
Yeah. She withholds it until he agrees to write a new Misery novel, essentially using his addiction to control him. King doesn't shy away from showing us Paul's agony, both physical and mental.
It makes you think, right? How much control do we really have when someone else holds the keys to our well-being, literally and figuratively?
That's a question that runs through the whole novel. For sure, King forces us to consider how easily our autonomy can be taken away.
And the lengths we might go to just to survive.
Exactly. What would you do in Paul's situation? Would you compromise your values, your art, just to appease your captor?
It's a tough question.
Heavy stuff, but that's what makes Misery so compelling. It's not just horror, it's psychological thriller. It digs into the darkest parts of obsession, control, and the power of creation.
You got it. And this is just the beginning. Remember, Paul's a smart guy. He's not just going to lie down and take this. He's already starting to scheme, planning his escape.
But can he really outsmart Annie? She seems to be always one step ahead.
That's the question. It's like a game of chess, but with incredibly high stakes. And speaking of stakes, things take a dark turn when Paul makes a chilling discovery. Annie's scrapbook.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, let's just say it reveals a pattern of death and violence that follows Annie wherever she goes. This is where the true horror of Annie's character comes out, right? It goes beyond just being a fan. Now we're talking about a potential serial killer.
Exactly. It adds a whole new layer of terror to Paul's situation. He's not just trying to escape captivity anymore. He's fighting for his life.
So how do you even reason with someone who's that detached from reality? How do you survive when every word, every action could be your last?
That's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. You won't want to miss this. So last time we were talking about Paul finding that scrapbook and all the evidence pointing to Annie being a serial killer.
Yeah.
Talk about a shock.
Yeah. It's like the ground just shifted beneath him.
Yeah.
Escape wasn't enough anymore.
Yeah.
Now it was about pure survival. So with that knowledge, how does Paul even start to deal with her?
Well, he has to become even more cunning. Think about it. Paul's a writer. His mind is his most powerful tool.
So he uses that to his advantage.
Exactly. He starts playing this really dangerous game, trying to figure out Annie's moods, keep her happy while secretly planning his escape.
Sounds like walking a tightrope.
You got it. One wrong move, and it's over. And it goes beyond just a physical escape, too. He has to outmaneuver her mentally. That's where the whole Scheherazade complex comes in. You familiar with that?
Maybe. Remind me.
Sure. Basically, it's from 1001 Nights. It's about that storyteller, Scheherazade. She avoids being executed by keeping the Sultan hooked on her stories.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So Paul becomes like a modern-day Scheherazade, right? He uses that new misery novel to keep Annie distracted, buy himself some time.
Wow, that's a great comparison. Writing for his life, literally. But Annie's not stupid, is she?
No, she's not. And that's where the suspense really builds. King keeps reminding us of Paul's situation. He's still recovering from that accident, in constant pain. And Annie, she gets even more unpredictable.
You were saying earlier about her mood swings.
Oh, yeah, they get way worse. One minute she loves his writing, the next she's furious over nothing.
Right.
It gets so bad that she does something really horrific.
Maybe.
She amputates Paul's thumb with an axe.
Oh, my God. What? Why?
She says it's a pre-op shot for his leg injury. It's totally insane.
It's beyond brutal. King really goes there. But what's the meaning behind it, do you think?
I think it's about control, but taken to this extreme, that typewriter, the symbol of Paul's creativity, it's broken now. He literally can't write without Annie's help.
And that missing end key.
Oh, man. Yeah. It takes on a whole new meaning, doesn't it?
For sure. It's like Paul is being erased, his voice silenced. It's powerful stuff. So what does Paul do? After, losing his thumb, his captor is clearly a psychopath. You'd think he'd give up.
He doesn't. In fact, it seems to make him even more determined to get out. That violence, it's a turning point. He realizes how dangerous Annie really is, and that playing by her rules won't save him.
So he changes tactics?
He has to. He starts manipulating her routines, little things, just to get some control back. Remember, he's still writing that misery novel, but now it's more than that. It's a way to keep her occupied, to buy himself time.
A story within a story, both with life or death consequences.
Yep. Exactly. And just when you think Paul might have the upper hand, King throws in another twist. A state trooper shows up at Annie's door. He's been looking for Paul.
No! Talk about terrible timing.
Right. It seems like things are about to change. But it's a false hope. Annie totally freaks out. She's paranoid and raged, and she kills the trooper.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's it, right. There's no way back from that. Paul must realize then that Annie is gone. There's no reasoning with her.
You got it. The murder is like this final confirmation of who Annie really is and the danger Paul is in. Now he has to escape. It's not just about freedom anymore. It's about survival. And he has to act quickly.
So what happens next? Does he finally outsmart her?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the final part of our deep dive. Let me just say, the ending of Misery is just as intense and messed up as everything that comes before it.
So last time things were not looking good for Paul at all. Annie had just murdered a state trooper right in her own house. I mean, what does he do at that point? There's no way Annie's going to let him go after that.
Right. And it's like that moment becomes the turning point for Paul. It's like the switch flips. He realizes that any hope of reasoning with Annie is gone. He has to get out no matter what, and fast.
So what does he do? Makes a run for it. Tries to overpower her.
Well, he's still pretty injured, remember? Can't exactly make a daring escape, but he does something pretty unexpected. He sets his manuscript on fire.
Wait, what? The manuscript? The one he's been slaving over for Annie? The one that's been keeping her relatively calm? That's crazy.
It is, but it's also brilliant. Think about it. What would completely distract Annie more than anything else? Seeing her precious misery novel going up in flames?
Ah, I see what you mean. He uses her obsession against her. It's like a diversion to create a chance to escape. But man, that's risky.
Oh, it definitely is. But it works. While Annie's panicking, trying to save the manuscript, Paul makes his move. He gets out of the house.
So he escapes. Just like that.
It's not that easy. Paul's still hurt, and Annie, well, she's not going to just let him go. There's a chase, a struggle. It all leads up to this final confrontation between them. It's intense, really brutal.
Okay. Don't leave us hanging. Does Paul survive?
He does, but it's not pretty. The fight is messy, chaotic. And even though he manages to overpower Annie in the end, the psychological damage is done. He's free, but he's going to carry the trauma of what happened with him.
So even though he escapes, part of him is still trapped. That's messed up.
Yeah, King doesn't really give us a happy ending here. It's ambiguous. We know Paul lives, but we're left wondering how he'll ever truly recover from that experience.
It really makes you think, that even when we escape a bad situation, the mental and emotional scars can stay with us. So to our listener who requested this deep dive into misery, I hope this gave you a glimpse into the terrifying journey that Paul goes through. It's a wild ride full of suspense and psychological terror, but it also shows the incredible strength of the human spirit, the will to survive.
It does, and it leaves us with some important questions. How much control do we really have over our own lives? How easily can we be manipulated by someone else's obsession? And can we ever really escape our past?
Though there's some heavy questions, Misery is one of those stories that really gets under your skin and stays with you long after you finish it. And if you're looking for more stories like that, well, Stephen King has plenty more where that came from. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, happy reading.